I guess we'll get started. It's a little past 3:30, but right now we have Camille Parrish won't be coming. She emailed me. We have no existing chair, so as clerk, I guess I'll open the meeting with the first agenda item, which is election of officers. Something we do every year. Having no chair.
I was going to say, I'm a dead end over here, so am I supposed to bring these? You'll get your stuff.
Recording mic, you good?
For record.
Okay. So I guess what we should start off with is election of a chair. So I'll open up the floor to any nominees for chair of the commission.
I would like to nominate Steve French. He's interested as chair. I don't
Second.
know if you're not interested, if you're interested.
Is there a second for that? Any other nominees for chair?
I'll nominate Evan Sear.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
So are there any other nominees for chair? Okay, so we have two. All right. What do you want to?
Speeches?
Speeches.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's actually probably not a bad idea.
Right, exactly, because I don't know a lot of people's background and, you know, how long we've been with the commission, Watershed, just got a scratch on the surface.
That's Scott. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Steve French. I've been on the commission more than 10 years. I represent the towns of Hebron and Buckfield. Growing up, I grew up on Lake Auburn until I was 12, 13 years old. My family had a camp thing. And then when I was 18 years old, I went to work for the Auburn Water District for off and on 14 years. I've been a mechanic policy superintendent there and an employee for 34 years. So I have a pretty good background in water. Thank you.
Evan Sear. I live on West Auburn Road, so obviously that puts me sort of squarely in the watershed. I'm a high school teacher. I teach at Edward Little High School. This is my 13th year there. Actually 14th year. I've been teaching for 16 years. I taught down and back before that. This is my 10th year on the Auburn Planning Board. For 2 of those years, I was the chair of that entity. And I guess I'm just about rounding out my first year here on the commission. So.
I'd like to ask just a clarification question of whether we're going to have a vice chair. Because I know that wasn't a question that we did have before, but I think it's a good idea. We want 2 winners, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think under the going by past practice, we have a chair, vice chair, clerks, secretary, and treasurer. So that's the slate.
And right now, I know you and Kevin are both co-chairs. Is
Co-clerks.
Co-clerks, rather. And then is Mike,
Yeah, Mike's the secretary.
because I saw your great minutes and your notes. And then Heather
Is the treasurer.
is the treasurer, and I know that she's now our interim town manager. Does that need to go to the finance director, or is it just whoever's appointed?
It's an appointed.
It's an appointed,
Yeah.
so she's still appointed at this point. So I've been reading which, yes. So I just wanted to put that clarification out so that people know, as we vote for the chair, that there's also a vice chair position that would be open.
Does anyone else have any questions at all?
I have a question for both. If either one of you were elected chair, does the other person, or either one of you interested in the vice chair position as well?
I would consider you the chair.
Yes, I think so. I've spoken with a few members about some of the things I'd like to get done. I think I could do those in other capacity.
And the only other question I have is, and it's regarding the charter. Steve's position is supposed to come up every year between the municipalities of Minot, Hebron, and Buckfield. And those three municipalities are supposed to elect alternating the position for another year. But in the 20 years' time, probably, I don't think they have done that. And that's our charter. So I'm just concerned that a year from now, we'll have to pick another chair, or how long is this position good for now?
Annually.
It's annual.
Oh, it's annually
annual
anyway.
anyway, I think.
Okay, well, takes care of that. As long as he's legal to be chair himself.
Well, just in that topic in itself is, you know, I think understanding all of these rules and having some kind of clarification on it is a recommendation, I guess, informally, I'd like to throw out there that we do a workshop or do more about that than the discussion we can have right at this time. Is get, you know, the offices in place and have a little bit more of that started to chart out today when people were appointed and when they, but not everybody else knows those answers.
If I could follow up on that just a little bit. I know the position I hold now was vacant for quite a while. And I know that Minot every year appoints me. Hebron and Buckfield, I think notoriously has been a phone call. So if that's a gray area, I just want to point it out. I have never attended a Hebron or Buckfield select board meeting. They have phone calls been made, they've appointed me, and so if that's a gray area, I want to point it out.
I also see it as an area of trust. Doing this for 10 years and they're trusted, and if they have questions, they know where to go. So I guess in my view, I guess just as a discussion, not that it needs to be a formal recommendation right now, that Steve has more experience with the commission and how that it has been run in the past, and then Evan has, you know, some vision and foresight into the future, that I'd like to make a recommendation that, you know, Steve is awarded the chair position and Evan the vice chair. Seems like a great pair. And having backup is a great idea too.
Is that the form of a motion?
I would like to throw that into a motion if people agree that.
I would second the motion.
Who's this? I'm sorry.
Lee Clement, City Councilor from Lewiston. I'm here to fill out the term of Alicia Ray.
Do you want to join us at the table?
No, I'm fine, thank
You
you.
good?
Yeah.
Well, I guess there was a first and second, so is there a,
Perhaps a friendly amendment, if there's only that one motion on the floor, that the clerk or the registrar of the body cast one unanimous ballot in that respect, for Mr. French for chair and the other gentleman for vice chair.
I would ask a question of process. Process is incredibly important to me. And it's something that is direly lacking on this board. If we are engaged in the elections, it would be my preference that we would engage in that process, and that if that process would result in the same result as the motion, that's fine, but that the commission ought to follow whatever procedures they normally follow in the election.
I think it's making a motion.
Could we revert to the old town meeting method, paper ballot?
Actually, we could. I guess I have no problem with an open vote. I am just very much a process person. I've actually worked with, I think there's some folks at the table that recognize that. And so, to me, the reason process is incredibly important is just because it alleviates questions later on, right? It creates a certain level of legitimacy. So that way, when a decision is made, you know, board or committee can point to a process as justification. So that's just why I asked. And quite frankly, I couldn't find any information on how the elections are run, so I wasn't sure what that process is.
From my understanding, it would revert to Robert's rules. Robert's rules is a motion on the table, we can table that motion and we vote on it. Or we'll make it, you know, before another motion is made, so. I think if everyone's comfortable with Robert's rules of just making a motion, and if they agree to vote on that motion, they can vote or abstain or table it, correct? And that's basically it.
Yep.
Like Robert's rules. Do whatever kind of motion you take.
So given that there was a first and second, so I guess a vote on whether to go forward with that. If that fails, then we'll revert back to another process.
Well, I think if that's the process that's been followed in the past, then that should be the process. There's no revert back to the council.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that if this motion second, if this vote fails, then we probably will be looking at a, like you mentioned, paper ballot for, because there were two candidates for that.
So for process, there was a motion before that. So just to clarify, before we got into the two nominations, and then there was a motion for Steve to be chair that was seconded. So, and then there was another nomination for Evan, and then we went into the discussion. So now there's been a second motion.
So
I don't know what the answer is, I'm just telling you there was that.
In years past, we've had one nomination and then the show of hands, so this new to me.
Yeah, the last time that we did this was actually, from the minutes, was 2018. It got kind of clunky the last few years because of, well, there was a lot of people coming and going, and then COVID hit, so it didn't really happen last year. So this is the first time we're getting around to filling the full slate again.
I'd like to remove the motion that I made, the second one. I think as far as the notes and minutes go. And we'll vote on the first motion of.
Was it a motion or a nomination? I guess is my question.
Oh, yeah,
I think
it
this
was
is,
a
I think this is the first, your motion is the first one.
Yeah, the first one I wrote
Yeah,
down,
it was
I wrote down Mary Ann nominated Steve French, seconded by Amy, and then Evan was nominated by Dan, seconded by Alan.
So two
Colebrook.
nominations, one motion then.
And then you have now made a motion,
that
seconded.
works.
We've landed in the process and voted on. Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
So then we'll call for a vote, or we use the hands, whichever.
Just a point of order, can we get introductions real quick across the room?
Sure. Mary Ann
How
French?
many Lewiston councilors are here
There are
that are voting?
Just
this
one,
was-
just one's going to vote.
Just one's voting?
have we established that? That was what I was hoping to, I know it's a bit of a headache, but discuss first. And as I said, Councilor Clement was the one voted on by the city council and has the seniority in that. And he's here to fill out the term for Councilor A, so I am okay in stepping back from my position here on this board to make sure that the rules are all followed the way they are intended to be.
And I understand that you will need to find another citizen to fit this spot. So in Lewiston's three positions, one is open and unfilled for this vote at this time.
This may be an unforeseen circumstance because Mr. Roebuck was just anointed or appointed last night to fill a term of a councilor who resigned. And I don't think any forethought was given to that. So I would think he would be allowed to serve in his capacity until such time as a replacement is made.
I was just asking for introductions.
Yeah.
I agree, I think we should have introductions.
And I also just wasn't sure if the
Yeah.
bylaws or the.
Yeah, I need to get into the.
Yeah, sorry, but that was a concern I had.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to make sure I was obeying all the rules. But yeah, I am Caleb Roebuck. I was appointed here as the citizen representative from the city of Lewiston, and was just appointed to the city council last night.
I'm Alan Holbrook. I am a commissioner from the town of Turner.
Dan Delitto, I'm dual commissioner and Auburn Water District trustee from Auburn.
Kevin Gagne, Deputy Director for Lewiston Public Works, also co-clerk on this board this time.
I'm Erica Kidd. I'm the Watershed Manager for Auburn Water District and City of Lewiston Water Division.
Lee Clement, City Councilor, City of Lewiston.
Good for me.
I'm Jim Cross. I'm an attorney from Skelton, Tainter, and Abbott, who serves as counsel to the commission.
Evan Sear, appointed commissioner from Auburn.
Eric Cousins, Planning and Permanent Director for Auburn, and I'm not a commissioner, I'm just here as a guest.
Amy Landry, the Executive Director here at APCOG and on the commission representing APCOG.
And Mary Ann French, Public Works Director for the city of Lewiston, one of their appointed positions. Not appointed, yeah. Did I say? I've been studying.
Yep, Sid Hazelton, Auburn Water Superintendent, and co-president of the commission. So, with all the, yeah.
Oh, Mike Broadbent, Auburn Water and Sewer District Assistant Superintendent. I am the current secretary to the commission.
I'm Brenda Benner. I'm a guest representing Perkins Ridge Snow Travelers. We're on the agenda for an agreement.
Casey Geiger, Auburn Water District Trustee.
Will Libby, I'm here as a guest, working with the City of Auburn.
Heather Hunter, I'm the treasurer for the Watershed, also work for the city of Lewiston.
There is room up here, Heather, if you want to come.
Okay. So no sneaking to the back of the room.
In the dark.
We were just talking about this city meeting to find another resident or another body that's not a city councilor to fit the third spot for voting. And come with our protocol, we have a nomination on the table right now for Steve French to be the chair and Evan Seer to be the vice chair. And looking at the roll call, trying to make it sure which way the voting commission is, and now we have that process down.
So I believe we have 7. Camille Parrish is not here. Okay, so we have 7. So I guess at this point, we're going to vote on the motion that was seconded.
Sid, before we vote, just another point of order. We have our counsel here. Can he give us what options we have? Because some of us that are not schooled in Robert's rules, this could just go flying right over our head. We might have a couple options here or not. As far as how can we table this and actually have a formal process to elect a chair at our next meeting?
I mean, my answer to that is, I guess if it's what the commissioners wanted to do and there was a vote to table, that would be no problem with that, but right now, there is a motion on the floor that's, I guess, right now in the discussion phase, and after discussion ends, it's in order for a vote, as I see it.
So the vote to table would have to occur when? So I could motion to table this, and if there's a second, we could discuss that.
Yes, a tabling motion can intervene.
I'll make a motion to table this to the next meeting, next regular meeting. The elections.
Is there a second on that?
I'll second that.
All right, I guess we'll vote on that. All those in favor of tabling?
So we are not having a discussion.
Sorry.
Motion to table, there is no discussion, is there?
That's right. I think under Robert's rules, that's
I guess you're
correct.
right.
There's no discussion on a table motion.
So it looks like that motion fails.
Okay, thank you.
2-5. So now back to can you read that motion again, Mike? That
Mary makes motion for chair to be Steve and vice chair to be Evan Seer, seconded by Lee Clements. Sorry.
Is there any discussion on that motion that was made? All those in favor?
Three.
Opposed?
2.
It's 3-2.
Why can't the people who are nominated vote?
We can. I choose to abstain.
Oh,
Good
did you
form.
choose to abstain
Good
as well?
form.
Okay, so.
All right, so with that motion passing, we have Steve as the chair and as vice chair. Well, that's Steve, I'll turn it gladly over to you. So we have the remaining slate of officers, which are clerk, co-clerk, secretary, and finance. Treasurer, sorry.
Co-clerk, there's 2 co-clerks.
Yep.
So I'll entertain a motion for, how you do 2 clerks at once?
Like to retain, make a motion that Kevin instead maintain the co-clerkship. in
So
the
you
next year.
nominate Kevin
Nominate
and
first.
Sid
Yeah.
as co-chair, co-clerks.
Co-clerk.
That's your motion.
Nominate him first, then. It's a nomination for both Kevin and Sid.
Anybody care to second that?
Awesome.
Thanks, Amy.
All those in favor?
It was a nomination, not a motion.
And then you, give her the nomination.
So we would, based on the process we just followed, would now require a motion.
No, it's not a motion, yeah.
So then make a motion for Sid and Kevin to remain as co-chairs of this commission.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4.
All those opposed?
3,
3.
4, 3.
4 to 3.
and 7.
On this one. Okay, so by that. Treasurer was the next one?
There's secretary and treasurer
Secretary.
left. Yeah.
I'll nominate Mike Broadbent as secretary.
Second.
Oh, yeah, I'll make a motion to have Mike Broadbent serve as secretary.
And I'll second that.
Just to back up one step, were there any other nominations?
Oh, yeah.
Seeing none, we'll continue. So you made the motion to have Mike.
Yes.
All those in favor?
6, 7.
7. Anyone opposed? Moving right along. Treasurer?
I nominate Heather Hunter to remain the treasurer of this commission.
I second that.
You'll say county is that?
So best money person to go.
Motion?
Make a motion to appoint Heather as the treasurer of this commission.
I second that.
Any other nominations? Now I'll entertain a motion.
That was the motion. So they nominated, and then that was just Mary Ann motion, Amy seconded to appoint Heather as treasurer.
I'm not gonna do this for another year. All those in favor of Heather?
6.
Thank you. I think that's all we,
Was Dan against, or did you?
Was there opposed?
Was there supposed to be discussion before the vote? Because I just had a clarification question, she could have my vote. She's now interim city manager for the city of Lewiston. There's an assistant finance director. Will that person possibly be doing this job, or are you going to come back to finance director after the city gets a new manager? I don't know.
I think it's up in the air.
It's up in the air, okay. So I'll just abstain if that's
Anybody
okay.
but a city councilor can be appointed.
did you get that, Mike?
Yep, one abstention.
Thank you.
If I could just point out before we go any further, we just had introduction, and this is different than what I've seen in the past. It used to be one person would come, one person would go, and that one person that would come would stand up and give an introduction. So it made it easy for us around the room to know who you're dealing with. And so I think we just learned a lot today about a lot of people, so going forward, I just want to point that out. Election of officers. Approve the minutes of regular meeting of June 9th, 2021.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of June 9, 2021.
Anyone care to second that?
I can second clarification.
Sure.
Do you know if my name could be added to the one abstention on the agenda item number 5? That was that Perkins Ridge Snow Traveler thing, and I didn't vote on that. I abstained. I don't know if we could just add my name on that, or is that okay, or?
In the past, we haven't put names with votes, but you were the one abstention.
Yeah, because I'm also part of that group, so, okay. All right, that was the only question I had on that. And
I
then,
just had a couple, oh, sorry.
No, that's it.
I just had a couple, under that motion, it says Wapcott instead of Lake Olive Watershed Protection Commission.
Oh, yeah,
So get
right.
rid of the A on there.
Ooh.
And then under agenda item number 8, bylaws, is in many cases.
So Dan, I get what you're saying, to have your name written on this, so it shows there's no conflict of interest.
Right.
And that kind of stuff, so I think
Yeah.
in this case, it is good to add that name.
I can add that. It's not a.
Thanks.
And that's all I had for comments.
So we have a few corrections.
Yep.
I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as corrected.
So moved.
Can I get a second that? It's been seconded. All those in favor? Anyone opposed?
I have to abstain, I wasn't present at that meeting.
All right, of course, we're going to go to executive session regarding potential litigation in accordance with 1 MRSA subsection 405(6)E.
I move that we enter executive session pursuant to 4056E for consultation with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of LawPAC, where premature public disclosure would clearly place a party in a substantial disadvantage.
As a point of discussion, could we do both executive sessions back to back, so that we're.
If I could, Mr. President. I typed this motion for somebody to read because I didn't like what was on the agenda. I don't think it accurately reflects what we're doing, and I think it would be important to be accurate.
So these still one and the same.
Yes, one executive session.
Okay.
Does it need to be seconded?
Yeah, there's a motion on the table from Evan.
Yeah.
Seconded.
And you're going to second that?
Yes, I will.
Okay, all those in favor?
Is this the part I have to recuse myself?
5-4.
Anybody that's not a voting commissioner needs to leave.
Excuse me?
Doesn't everyone who's not a voting commissioner need to leave the
Yes.
executive session?
But just point of clarification, I'm only recusing myself for the first executive session?
We separated them as separate.
Or you can go outside.
Item number 3, the one that we just went into.
You're recording.
So we're out of
We
executive
are out
session.
of executive session.
So I'd like to make a motion to authorize Jim Frost to work with Kevin, Erica, and Evan Seer to provide a response to a request for information from a state agency.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed?
That was 6.
And I'll recuse.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here again. See you guys soon. Unless you need me to stay for anything, Mr. President.
Nothing that I'm aware of. Anybody have any reason to keep our counsel here? Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Number 4. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on here too. So Eric Cousins has joined us from the city to talk about some proposed zoning amendments. One of the bigger packets I handed around, I just put this on the city's website.
Yep.
Gives more detail about this, but I think hearing from Eric is going to be helpful, especially if there are any questions from commissioners about these proposed zoning amendments. So we're going to get set up on the TV here.
Yeah, and I don't know how much detail you want to go into or how much time you want to spend on it, but I can go through the same presentation that we'll do at planning board on Tuesday night. Or, I mean, the gist of it is that we have a lot of residential road strips along our rural roadways that are, most of them are currently from the center line of the road. They extend 450 feet in each direction. So they're 900 feet wide with the road traveling down the center of it. In the 1980s, they were 750 feet from the center line of the roadway, and the city was seeing some little subdivision, kind of dead-end roads being created. That was enough depth that somebody could afford, justify building a short road with a half a dozen house lots. The city council at the time and planning board decided that they didn't want to see that type of development in the rural areas. So they narrowed them up to the current 450 feet deep in almost all of the road strips, but not every single one of them. There's still like Perkins Ridge, there's only one side of the road, but it's 750 feet deep, and there are a couple of other instances like that. So the current discussion that was put on the table by a couple of city councilors and then voted on by the council is to bring those back to 750 feet in almost every instance, except for where the boundary abuts a floodplain, a 100-year floodplain. They don't want to expand the residential strips into 100-year floodplains. This one, look through, but you can see really in the, we broke it up just for our mailing notices, and so that if we had to have separate meetings, we could notify people in different zones here, zone 1 through 5. But you can see really in the southern part of the city, along Route 136, there's a long residential strip, Pownell Road, Trap Road, and then, you know, the core of the city is where we've really focused our development largely over the years. And then in the northern part of the city, around the Lake Auburn watershed, a lot of it in the Lake Auburn watershed. We have a lot more of those residentially zoned strips that have agricultural land. The dark green and the brown up around Lake Auburn, and those stripes are the residential strips, and that really light sort of mint green color is all agricultural zone. Initially we sent a notice out to about 1,350 people that the council had put forward a motion to say.
Does that work, Eric?
What's that?
Does that work? The advanced?
It's,
Do
no, but
you have
that's
it
it's on
in
now.
your laptop?
Yeah.
You have
I could.
Oh,
No, you have to put this in your laptop.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good catch.
So when we started the discussion, we had this order from the council to expand those trips to 750 feet deep on either side of the road, or to the property line, whichever is less. It was quite a bit of work to draw those maps. It would have been simple if they just went with 750 feet, but to try to follow property lines wherever the property line is less than 750 feet, it was a fair amount of mapping work to draw those. So we brought it to the planning board, got them to talk through the general concept, and then went back to the council, explained to them how much it was going to cost to draw the maps, and then they directed us to go ahead and draw the maps. And that's why the second time we went to the council and planning board, the abutters, the number of abutters was less, because the first time we notified way more people than we had to make sure we didn't miss anybody. And then when we had the really specific maps, we could refine that. So it's been to the council. Council has now sent it back to the planning board for public hearing, and that's what we're doing next Tuesday.
No way.
Good. Sorry, thank you. So this is the second order from the council that sent it back to the planning board after we had the maps, to hold a second public hearing, because it's a different list of butters. There were a lot of people concerned about us not having the maps at the first discussion, and just talking through the concept. So that's where we're headed on Tuesday next week. As we started to draw those maps, there were a lot of questions about how to interpret the council's order, so we went through all of these questions. We are extending to 750 feet on any property that has residential frontage on the road that the strip is based on. We are not extending it if a property does not have frontage on a street, but there's a residential strip on an abutting street. We're not extending it onto a new street. We're sticking with the existing strips that parallel the existing residentially zoned roadways. 3 is similar, we're not extending across a roadway boundary if there's a road that parallels the residential road that's not in the zone. There's some pictures coming up that will help clarify those. One of the questions was where we had those residential subdivisions that were created when the strips were wider, do we expand those as well? They said no. And then the last one, number 6, was what I mentioned about the floodplains, especially along Riverside Drive and some along the Little Androscoggin River. We have a number of residential strips that end at the floodplain, and they want to continue to end those at the floodplain. This is just an image of that number 1 criteria. In this case, we would, because the lot has frontage on the road that already has the residential strip, we would move the line back from the 450 that's shown in brown all the way to the purple dotted line, and it would actually wrap around the other parcels that are there. So that property would gain a fair amount of residential zone, but it could still be accessed from the existing residential strip. And lots that do not have the required road frontage. So in this case, this one has some road frontage. It has access from the residentially zoned road. That one would be extended to the purple line, the 750 feet. In this case, the existing brown residential strip is what's out there now. The purple line you can see on the south, sort of the southwest side of Steel Road. If we were to go to 750 feet deep, we would actually be essentially crossing Steel Road and creating a residential zone on a road that doesn't have a residential zone now. So in this case, we would stop at the right-of-way boundary where the purple line is along Steel Road and not extend out to the black line that would be the 750. This is one of the subdivisions that was created that the earlier council wanted to avoid in the future. Kind of the driver, a couple of these were the drivers in reducing the strips from 750 to 450 feet in depth. And in this case, the council said we would expand the residential strip along Powell Road to 750, but we would not expand the strip along Partridge Lane to 750, with the idea that every time somebody does a subdivision and they have another discussion like this, it would go out another 300 feet, and they did not want to do that. And the backside of Taylor Pond, we have a residential strip. It's not along a single roadway, but there's a lot of small private camp roads. They chose not to expand the strip along the west side of Taylor Pond. That green residential strip along the pond is 250 feet deep. They did not want to expand it to 750. So all of our online maps have been updated to reflect those discussions. In this example is the floodplain example along Riverside Drive. To go to 750 on the riverside would extend into the floodplain in most cases, and they chose not to do that. But we would expand it on the side to the west of Riverside Drive to the 750 feet where you see those dotted lines. Traffic.
I assume, I didn't see an example around Lake Auburn, but I assume all of those are pretty cut and dry because they've all got frontage, so pretty much all of those would go to 750.
Yeah, unless the parcel is less than 750 feet
Right.
deep, then it would stop at the rear parcel.
Yeah.
There may be, Woodman Spring Road might be an example as you approach the northern end and North Auburn Road, that we would not extend if we were expanding the strip along North Auburn Road.
It would go all the way to Spring Road.
But we wouldn't cross Spring Road and pick up land on the other side. There might be a couple of other examples with roads like that. Hersey Hill might be an example for some individual lots. Traffic was something that came up. We've gone through and tried to look at some general numbers of minimum lot sizes, septic design standards largely in the Lake Auburn watershed, and tried to subtract out some of the total acreage that the just blanket strips would create for residential zone, because we don't think it's accurate that everybody would take their acreage and divide it up into 1 or 3 acre lots regardless of environmental constraints or wetlands, site distance. Most people aren't going to build a new road to access their acreage, so we subtracted some for development costs. It's clear through the public process that there are a lot of property owners that are not interested in seeing any development on their land or their neighbor's land, so we subtracted out some more. We think that it probably, over the next 10 years, creates the potential for about 300 new acres of developed residential land. And the other 900 are probably limited by constraints or the choice of the owner not to develop that. That equates to about 15 trips per residential roadway involved in the change in the PNP tower. 15 vehicular trips, so not a lot of traffic if those assumptions are right, but those assumptions can certainly be questioned.
I don't know if this is coming, but as this relates again to the properties in the water, this, given the restrictions that are in the watershed overlay, how does that equate to expanding the buildable area within those lots?
So the
I don't know if that's coming up, but
the residential zoning would be expanded, but most of the septic system design on suitable soils, the minus 150 acres, that's really an assumption based on the Lake Auburn watershed properties. There are a lot of properties that are just not suitable for wastewater disposal because of that standard. So it doesn't change that standard. The residential portion of the property might be expanded, but unless you have the soils for wastewater disposal that meet the watershed standard, you still wouldn't be able to create a house.
So in the watershed, most of the zoning, if you're expanding that rural residential, you're expanding into ag, into
Yep.
resource protection, right?
In every case.
In
yeah.
every case, okay.
Yeah. We did not expand a strip, I think it was Foster Road as an example. There are some residential strips that have some industrial land behind the strip. We did not expand into industrial zones. It was purely where there was ag zone.
Is it safe to say that extending this, so was specifically with respect to the Lake Auburn watershed, expanding the buildable area on a lot does nothing to increase its buildable, the buildability, a horrible word, like the ability to build on the lot any more than currently exists because of the septic standard?
Yeah, unless you have the soils for the septic standard. Yeah, unless that parcel has the appropriate soils for a new.
Right, so if you can't build now because of the septic standards, you will still not be able to build. That's really the limiting factor, not the amount of residential land on the property.
Correct, I would completely agree.
But you can build other structures.
You can build other structures now. If you wanted to build a barn or a garage.
Right, I was just thinking maybe you don't necessarily have the room for it, but if you gain another 300 feet, maybe.
There's no restriction on building those in the end.
Yeah, you could build an accessory structure.
Okay.
does this expand on the phosphorus requirements, or does it change that at all?
Those still exist. You would still have to, if you create over 1,500 square feet of driveway expansion or 575 square feet of roof or building footprint, you would still have to do a phosphorus plan.
So that's not changing as a result of this?
That's not.
It's not going to expand the phosphorus calculation?
It does not. No. The phosphorus calculation is really based on acres, your percentage of acreage within the entire watershed, and that just doesn't change.
If someone has a functioning septic system on their house lot, and they build a second property, can they use that existing septic field?
So and this is a source of a lot of frustration for homeowners in the watershed that we kind of field the calls on. If you have a 2-bedroom house in the Lake Auburn watershed right now, and your septic system is designed to serve a 2-bedroom house, and you had 2 children, you just had twins, now you have 4 children, you cannot add a bedroom to your house in the Lake Auburn watershed, because adding a bedroom, unless you have the soils that meet the septic system standard, adding a bedroom would increase your wastewater demand, and you're not able to make your system less conforming. I would look at that the same way, that you could not add wastewater demand to that property for a second house, unless you have the soil, the way that we interpret the ordinance. But that's pretty frustrating for somebody that has a house that needs extra space on the other side of that. And that's been one of the big criticisms that's hard to defend when you're in front of the family that just have children with needs. But that has prevented people from adding on. They can add on living space, but not bedrooms. The plumbing code looks at bedrooms to determine wastewater demand.
Question for Eric, if someone was to apply for a permit and they could expand, build a barn, update their phosphorus plan, or add a second house or building that, for occupants, would it be possible to make sure that those designs are like low impact development standards? Is that something that's coming around, or?
I know that the scenarios that were discussed at the council meeting in the Lake Auburn watershed study, 2 out of the 3 of those include low impact design standards. So I think there will be a recommendation out of that study for any new developments to use those standards.
Which might mitigate an extra building being built, impervious area, et cetera, in the Lake Auburn watershed.
Or at least treat any stormwater that it creates. So yeah, there's nothing as part of this discussion that includes that, but I do expect that to be one of the recommendations of the watershed study.
So what is, you have one more slide, or should
We can go through a few more, yeah, I don't, John just updated this one, and I honestly haven't proved it, so I don't know.
Just so I don't get lost in the shuffle, what's the timing? You've got another meeting for the planning board in a couple of days.
Planning board is Tuesday.
Yep.
That's at 6 o'clock in the council chambers. That's a public hearing, and all the property owners that are affected or within 500 feet of property that's affected have been notified. And the council last night voted to have another public meeting, a community conversation as they call it.
After that meeting?
After that meeting on October 4th
Okay.
at 5:30 at the senior community center.
And from there, it goes back to the council for final vote?
Yep,
Sometime this fall?
if the planning board finalizes a recommendation on Tuesday, then it would go to that council ordered meeting on October 4th, and then back to council, probably the third Monday in October. Would be the second council meeting on the third Monday in October. So, yeah, we can go through more if you want. This is just traffic information where we were drawing the estimates from the Institute of Traffic Engineers. And then it gets into more of a value discussion, tax changes that I just spoke to Ms. Benner about that. But there are some tax changes for people that will have a larger portion of their existing parcel in the residential zone that used to be in the ag zone. There's an increase in value associated with that.
What kind of feedback did you get so far? Was it in favor of this, or is it kind of a?
We have both.
Yeah.
We had one meeting where there was a lot of people in favor of it. The other meetings, there's been more people that have been opposed to it. But we've heard from people on both sides of that when they're at the meeting where there's a bunch of people that get up and speak in one way or another, the other side's less comfortable to speak.
Whoever speaks first.
So I think the majority of people that have been at the meetings are people that we notified because they own property in the zone or within 500 feet. And I would say the majority of feedback has been that they don't see this as necessary or they have concerns.
So expanding their building zone, like for someone in the watershed, expanding that zone could increase their taxes,
Yep, good.
but not make it a lot any more buildable.
You'd have to look at every lot, you know, if there was a lot that the expansion was entirely wetland, then I would say it doesn't make their lot any more buildable. But then they could come back and talk to the assessor and explain that that whole area is wetland, and probably get an adjustment if they don't already have an adjustment, based on the actual buildability of that parcel. Same thing with the wastewater standard. There are a lot of people that have shown the assessor that their excess land or their individual parcel does not have the soils. And because it's not buildable in the watershed without the soils, they'll reduce the taxable value because it's logical that somebody would not pay as much for that parcel with that restriction.
Well, there's some lots that put them into some better soils to actually put a septic system.
So you,
We've done that already.
yeah, and you can extend your septic system outside of the residential zone if you have the soils on the parcel already. Or onto another parcel, an adjoining parcel, potentially, if that's where the soils are.
The parcel across the street as well. I mean, there's a lot of different cases out there.
There's a couple of them on West Auburn Road, yeah, historic homes that have their septic system on the other side of the road, because that's where they have room.
Along with the city, there are state programs available as well for conservation of open space, tree growth, agriculture.
Yeah, and Auburn has a really low participation rate in those because our ag zone, when the ag zone was created, those state programs didn't exist, and part of the goal of the ag zone was to provide a similar type of tax relief to somebody who was willing to hold large pieces of land that really don't cause any cost for services to the city. But the ag zone has existed since those state programs were created, and we have a really low participation rate in those because people are already getting sort of the same benefit from owning large tracts of land in the ag zone. But if there were changes to that, I think we'd see a spike in participation in those programs.
Yeah, I was going to point out, as a commissioner, I look at it as an opportunity to encourage homeowners and property owners within the watershed to take advantage of those, because they're as good as forever covenants. I mean, if you violate the terms of the program, you owe back taxes, I think for like 5 years. So there's sort of a stiff penalty for enrolling and then choosing not to hold up your end of the bargain with regard to either maintaining tree growth or conservation open space and leaving the land the way it is. Right now, there's not necessarily financial incentive to do that for homeowners and property owners around the lake. So I say that just, as I said, as commissioner, just looking forward, saying that there's actually a possible opportunity for us to educate property owners and landowners and actually encourage that they take advantage of some of those state programs and put some of that land into conservation that isn't currently in conservation. So it's a way to sort of protect the watershed.
And that's been, I only know of one agricultural conservation easement in the watershed that I'm aware of. The Maine Farmland Trust has often commented that our ag zone, although it provides a temporary protection to the land from being used for housing or other commercial uses, they can't justify permanent conservation easements very easily because there's not enough of a difference in value from that agriculturally zoned land to the full residential value that they usually encounter in other communities that they buy from the landowner in order to acquire the permanent protection. And then zoning could change with any council. You know, that's something that is not permanent.
Want me to keep going?
Sure. Yeah, there's one good slide summarizing taxes. They're not there.
To be determined.
Yeah, they were there this morning. So a couple of examples on North Auburn Road that we used. for taxes that the assessor put together. It's hard for her to answer everybody's individual questions in a meeting, how does it
Those are
affect the
actually, they're in this that I passed around.
Oh, good.
Like,
Yeah, there's
Pulled
a
this from-
spreadsheet in there.
yeah, page 4.
We basically looked at how much acreage came out of each of these parcels, came out of the ag zone and went into residential. I don't know, hopefully you don't recognize the address as yours, I guess, but 483 West Auburn Road.
West Auburn Road?
West Auburn Road, based on the 2020 mill rate. Their current lot size is a little under 10 acres, 9.31. There's 2.39 in the residential zone and 6.9 in the ag zone. With the change, they still have a 9.31 acre lot size. Instead of 2.39 acres of residential, they have 4.75. We would expect that their tax bill would go up by about $175 a year if this change were to pass. 480 West Auburn Road is an example of a larger lot that picks up a lot more residential land as part of the change. 47 acres, only 4.5 currently in the ag zone, in the residential zone. After the change, 15.2 acres would be in the residential zone. Their increase is almost $600 a year, so $583 just on the land value. Purely.
Is it safe to say that the difference is that 480 West Auburn has a much longer road frontage?
Either longer road frontage or they wrap around their neighbors' lots and their neighbors' lots are less than 750 feet. So, I don't think that those two scenarios, lots of road frontage versus owning some land behind your neighbors, should add the same amount of value. The road frontage probably adds more. But they probably, if they have that type of road frontage, they probably have a lot of additional value already incorporated in their current assessment. This one, I believe, mostly wrapped around their neighbors and picked up acreage rather than frontage.
Thanks for the clarification.
That's all I really have, unless there's any other questions. It's, the council really drove this discussion. Planning board will have their second public hearing on Tuesday. Encourage property owners to participate in the discussion. I think it's, sometimes people see a lot of people at a public meeting that are not happy with something and say, you know, why are we doing this, or this isn't working. But I think when you have a lot of people show up, the process is working. And people are coming out, they're voicing their opinions, even if people really disagree. It's a good public process that we're having to discuss this. So encourage people to keep participating if they feel strongly one way or another.
So the overall impact for Watershed is slightly more potentially buildable area.
Yes.
But we do factor in taking out, you know, wetland areas, unbuildable soils, those types of things.
Yep.
So that estimated 300 acres of buildable area, and that's not just in the watershed, that's including
Yes.
South Auburn too,
Yeah,
right?
citywide that we would expect to
Citywide.
actually be developed over the next few
Okay,
years.
okay.
We could try to pull a percentage, I guess, because I know that
I'd be
100,
curious about that.
yeah, the 150 acres for unsuitable wastewater soils was pulled directly from the watershed.
Right.
It's not applied to a local decision. But we could try to get the estimate.
Okay, that'd be
But
great.
they're all based on those assumptions. We're being honest about the assumptions.
Right.
They're assumptions.
It's an estimate.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
City Parks and Recreation Trail proposal.
Sure, yeah. Do you need to sort of,
Did you have a graphic?
oh, yes, can we pull up the agenda, this agenda on there? Because I included Will's graphic.
It's in the package, right?
It is in the packet, yes. On the agenda? Yep, yep, that's it. Yep.
might start talking.
Sure, yeah.
So my name is Will Libby, local trail builder. We're a local nonprofit for outdoor education. In the last year or so, I've been working with the city of Auburn and doing some work on appetite and some restoration, looking at improving trail systems within the community. And recently, I've been working with the previous education outreach director.
Yes, education and outreach coordinator. Will had connected with Sean when he was here, who I think most of you guys met. Counselor that was somebody, we had an education and outreach role for the watershed, so he worked with local community members, worked on planning out some trails in the watershed.
So from that conversation, some meeting with Sean, we had talked about the Salmon Point Trail out on watershed land. And about the same time, I started working with the Parks and Recs department on kind of refabbing the top lot parcel, 13-acre parcel off Route 4 on the old Fish Hatchery Road, and looking at reutilizing that as kind of an outdoor education center, focusing on some community garden space and using it for educational purposes. Parks and Rec were really looking to put a trail system in there, but they had a constraint with the size of the parcel. So I came in and looked at it, and while I was looking at that, I noticed the abutting property was watershed property, and I saw a natural opportunity there for a trail that could connect that top lot education center to that proposed Salmon Point Trail. It would create basically about a 2 mile to 2.25 mile trail following the small brook that comes out of the top lot and goes through the watershed land. So we'd be looking at putting in a natural surface nature trail along the brook and utilizing that space for community education, supporting school education as a destination spot, field trips, and then just open recreation education for community members. And also kind of create a destination point for top lot, bring people in. All of this being under the scope of conservation education within a wetland, since it follows a brook, and then there is a wetland delineation as we get closer to the Lake Auburn just before it crosses the road to the Salmon Point Trail. Is anybody able to see that?
I was going to say, so we're looking at a dashed line.
Oh, yeah, okay.
With some little
Great,
blobs
sorry.
that would be the educational sites or something.
Yeah, so the top lot is the small square with the top right corner, Auburn City of there. This is from an app I use when I'm laying out trail. So the blue line would be the brook trail that would be looking for partnership with the watershed to build. And the green circles along that trail would be areas where we'd have a bump out or a meeting area, low impact outdoor education classroom, where we could facilitate classes about the watershed. Some of these concepts were things that Sean and I were talking about working together to develop with the watershed, and it just kind of worked out that the city of Auburn was looking to do something in that same scope, so I kind of just connected the two dots and started the dialogue on potentially putting a system like this in. I know that there's mining rights for that large, it's a 143 acre parcel that the watershed has there. And this trail falls well, I guess, east of that. We wouldn't be within that. The mining rights are really, there wouldn't be any conflict in there at all. And we've identified some spaces in there that I think have been harvested in the past that could be refabbed and turned into little meeting places. We'd be looking at putting some wheelchair accessible parking along the old Fish Hatchery Road. It looks like a small purple diamonds on there, kind of a herringbone parking. We could utilize the road. We wouldn't have to do any major construction to put that in, and then we could have, that would give us some wheelchair accessibility into parts of Top Lot, but also open up some four-season trail use up in there.
So, go ahead.
The Taylor Road extension off and the road that goes into Tala, is that a culvert or a bridge that crosses Townsend Brook?
That is a culvert.
They're culverts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only, I think it's a great plan. More trails.
So Will and I had talked with a working group with other city, or not city councilors, but Parks and Rec Planning Board, Sabrina Best from Parks and Rec, she's the director. There are a couple other interested folks who walked this area, talked about the potential for top lot, so that would be on the city side. They'll be planning to revamp that, but also, like Will said, we have this large parcel owned by the commission next door that could be a good educational opportunity, recreational opportunity. So I had put in the proposals in here for your reference, along with this graphic. So I'm bringing this to the commissioners for any comment or questions first, and also approval to go forward with this plan as proposed by Will.
I have one question, comment maybe. Townsend Brook has been a great concern for phosphorus.
Yes.
Does this raise any red flags for you?
I think the low impact nature of what you had described and planned, it doesn't, but it is something to be cognizant of.
Might be worth noting, Dr. Francis Eanes from Bates College, environmental studies director, he has shown interest in and actually has given a few students through his environmental studies program to lend us to move forward with this project. They'll be helping us with the tot law, but if we're able to utilize watershed land, they would be coming in and they would actually be it would give them an opportunity to do some research on specific impact items, creating a data log of all of the plants that are in there, including invasives. So it would kind of hit some of the check marks that the watershed was trying to come up with invasive plans, but we'd be able to utilize Bates College Environmental Studies program potentially for multiple years as an ongoing monitoring and research partner in this as well.
Another question, so we're looking at pedestrian or handicap, pedestrian use, not bikes,
Right.
or other, or definitely no motorized vehicles?
Absolutely no motorized vehicles, yeah. We would be, because we want it to be relatively close to the brook to open up the opportunity to study and educate on waterways and sensitive areas. The brook trail would not be accessible, wheelchair accessible. We'd have to do more impact construction. It's just a small piece that abuts up there by the Purple Diamonds. That's off. That's actually just the fish hatchery road. We would be looking to be able to utilize a portion of that for some basically overflow parking if we're having an event or something, a summer event or school bus were coming in. There's not a lot of parking on top lot parcel. But this would be strictly foot traffic.
Snowshoe in the winter?
Snowshoe in the winter. Low impact, natural surfacing, would use the surfacing that was there, not importing any materials and using stone and stuff that lies right there on the property.
Would City of Lewiston Rec be able to use this facility as well?
I would assume so. I'm not the person.
Not listed in here.
I think the vision of this plan is to open it up to any of our surrounding community through Androscoggin County. Some of the ideas or some of the things that they were looking for is using this as an education site for city employees as well. We're talking about repairing zone or sensitive areas, being able to utilize this as municipal trainings, or public works could go in and take trainings. So really, when I say a scope of education, like any element of educational use that we could get out of this for the whole community, let's say all of Androscoggin County, or within our range.
And I would say certainly as on the commission-owned parcel, which is the vast majority of this, sure. Yeah, Lewiston
And I've
is
seen
party
the
for
trails
that.
down there. Great, really much more than a walk in the woods. They're really well constructed.
Yeah.
Seems to bring back the land lab that we lost.
That was kind of the inspiration. I walked the land lab early this spring to see if there was any possible way to kind of get that going again or something like it. And then after talking with Sean and then seeing what Watershed's goals in education and outreach were, then we started to look at other sites that we could kind of bring that concept back.
I had a question about the land bank, what's happened to that now? 'Cause I spoke to somebody that worked for the agency that ran the children's program there, and my understanding is they're no longer using that, so I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's a different company in there, I think it's Beckett.
Yeah, but they're no longer using that, they're no longer using that facility.
At
They-
all?
They moved their girls to a different program, they're not even using
Okay.
that, and I noticed that, I thought for a minute maybe they were camping, took the girls camping for a week or
Right,
something,
right.
but after a month's time, I noticed there's nobody around, and I bumped into one of the directors for that agency recently, he said that they're no longer using that.
Interesting,
So
okay.
I'm interested to find what's gonna happen with that, and again, that maybe
I'll
at some
I'll
point we
look
can.
into it
Yeah, maybe
because
that's
the
something
last
we
I
can
knew, they were using
reacquire.
it.
Yeah, because that's a great location there for
It is, and there are
educational,
trails back
educational
behind
stuff.
there.
Oh, yeah, I used to
Yeah.
go on those trails right down to the basin.
Exactly, yeah, they connect right over to the basin.
Is that the old CPY area?
Absolutely, yeah, yes, I think something you might wanna look into,
Yeah, I'll give them a call.
yeah.
Sean and I had gone out there and looked at that. We were both coming together with some info that we collected from different places, but I walked every inch of that landlord property and looked at the signs and took notes. I used to use that when I was younger, and I'd take kids up there. So yeah, it'd be really cool to continue on something like that. But this would be in that same spirit of that concept.
With the creation of this, and you're gonna add some parking over by the city lot, is there any consideration for like porta potties or anything like that over by that area? To kind of service anyone using this trail?
Tot Lot has facilities available, so the thought would be most people would start any programming there at Tot Lot having an intro, unless you were just out recreating, in which case you would do what you'd normally do if you're out for a hike. But we'd have some access trails from the Tot Lot parcel that would take you directly onto that Hatchery Road. So you would be able to start at Tot Lot, either parking there or the road, and be able to use the facilities before setting out into that.
And you don't anticipate any parking on the Lakeshore Drive side to access that end of the trail?
You know, Sean talked about that when we were looking at the Salmon Point Trail, that there would be the potential of having to put in some parking, but I don't know enough about that particular project. We were just kind of getting into it at the time that he left.
Yeah, so,
There's
there's a
this-
small
There's a little
sandy
turnout
turnout
there.
there.
I'm just worried, over the last couple of years, recreation has gone to a forefront. A lot more people are out using the trails, which is great. They look like the Whitman Spring Road. They're parking up and down the roads now there without adequate parking. I just want to make sure you create a trail like this, we have adequate parking, so we're not. I get calls all the time that hey, I'm out on the road, and or they don't have bathrooms. People get upset, and I'm like, well, okay, thanks for the call, and I'll filter it through. But just want to make sure you create like something, you build it, they'll come and they'll use it, and make sure we have the proper parking and facilities, I guess.
Yeah, and that's, I didn't put that in the plan, but if that's something that you want to look at, or somebody wants to go out and look at those, because there was talking of opening the parking for the Salmon Point Trail prior to, and this trail would just kind of connect to that, be a connector between two spots. I don't know what the parking plan for Salmon Point was, but there is a pull-in and a gate there, and we talked about the potential of opening that up a bit, and on the other side of the road as well.
Yeah. So we have that existing small dirt parking area kind of at the intersection of Maple Hill and Lakeshore Drive, which goes right into wetland as we have mapped out here. So I don't know how much room we have there, but it's something, we can look at that and see what would make the most sense for users of that end of it, and then how many we could get in at the Tot Lot line too. Any other questions or comments while we have Will here? So I'd be looking to the commissioners to get approval to move forward with this and continue working with the city of Auburn on it.
What's your pleasure?
Chairman, I'll motion to approve the Tot Lot Trail proposal as presented with considerations for porta potty and parking come back at a future meeting for commission approval.
Anybody care to second that?
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed?
Is that 7-0?
Thank you.
All right, great.
Thank you all. We'll be in touch.
All right, great.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Thank you, Judge.
Yes. So the financial statements were included in the package. They were as of the end of August. So there's, for those of you who are new to the committee or the commission, there's 4 months left in our fiscal year. We run on a calendar fiscal year. You will see the original budget and the final budget. In this particular case, there's not been any budget transfers. So we have total revenues on the operating account. That's our normal account that we use for general operating expenditures of $185,311.06. Kind of highlights there, obviously, the timber harvesting is the shining star that is exceeding and outpacing budget by about $73,000, close to $74,000. Conversely, in this present state of the economy and the interest rates are being somewhat dismal right now. Good thing it's not a material amount of money, but we will not be making anywhere close to the budget on interest investment earnings. You can see right now we're trailing about $2,400, almost $2,500 short, barely making a blip on the actual column at all. Expenditure side, the operating account has $73,366.20 in expenditures today. Obviously, we gross up the forestry. That's part of the requirement for the accounting purposes. So we have, you'll see the gross revenues for the forestry and then their actual costs for stumpage and so forth down below there. So when I get the check, it's the net check between those two. So with the timber harvesting revenue being exceeding budgets, obviously the forestry line item will also exceed budgets from the expenditure side of the house. We have a small deficit right now in public education, but that's typically all we charge there for the year. Legal fees based upon usage this year, that's one that fluctuates from year to year. So this year, obviously, we're running somewhat of a deficit based upon services rendered. Depreciation and amortization expenses, that's a line item, just as a reminder that we do not budget. That's an accounting requirement that we do to depreciating Watershed's assets. It's a non-cash expenditure, so as part of our budget, we budget on a cash basis, so you will see no budget for the operating account or the sinking fund for both of those. So it produces a deficit from a cash basis. So right now, we have a surplus of just shy of $112,000 on the operating side with 4 months to go. There's not as many different activities on the sinking fund side. We have our normal contributions as well as a few miscellaneous expenses attributed to those, so not a lot of activity there. And because of the depreciation expense on that side, you see a small surplus there of just shy of $3,500.
Good question. So contributions from AWD and LWD are $52,500, but then we give $6,000 back to them. Is there a reason why we're not just contributing $6,000 less?
Again, it goes back to those accounting requirements that require you to gross up. They want to track it. The other thing, having been on the commission as a treasurer since infancy, the quality between the water district and Lewiston Water Division was not always 50-50 in actuality. It depends on staff turnover and so forth, so it allowed us to track actual cost on who was performing what services.
So what are or to your best guess, what are the expenses, 6,000 from, that we're giving AWD back and LWD.
So if you look under the actual column,
Yep, actual.
right now, Auburn Water District was given about a little over $3,100 back, and the Worcester Water Division was given just under $4,900 back, based on
Full-
work provided.
For work provided by
Their crews.
crews.
Yes.
Okay.
Dock installation, pulling out, mowing lawns, picking up
Okay.
trash, snow plowing, that runs the typical gamut of what's built to the watershed.
What's your pleasure?
I make a motion to accept the quarterly financial update.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It's a vote. Thank you. Water quality update and activity report. Go back to you.
Sure. Try to keep this relatively brief, even though there's several bullets there. Water quality update, I've included some graphs and data in the packet for the commissioners. First graph on here is the graph of temperature. So that's surface temperature of the lake, and it's plotted over the year. There's a few of the previous years charted on there for reference. This year we had a rainy July, and it ended up being a little bit cooler, but our trend line follows previous year trend lines, with the exception of that small dip. And right now we're about 25 degrees Celsius, which is about 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's going to start to cool off here pretty quickly in September. So nothing really out of the ordinary with temp. The next graph is annual turbidity. So that's the clear cloudiness of the water. Again, for reference, there are previous years plotted on there. This year is the thicker black line. The summer has been pretty good for turbidity. It stayed low, right around the 0.5 line. The last couple of days, I did notice it's starting to come up towards a 0.6, 0.65. That's a seasonal fluctuation. We've had some windstorms and rainstorms coming through, so that causes things in the lake to mix. But again, this is exactly what we want to see in terms of turbidity. It's far below a 3, far below a 5, which is our waiver limit that was set. I included a sampling map in here for you guys again. I'll keep that in there in agenda packets to come. We have phosphorus sampling results from in the lake. Now, there are a few that I highlighted. These are any results that we got that are above a 10 for a total phosphorus reading in the lake. And then orthophosphorus, I highlighted if it also was a high total phosphorus, just so it was that whole, you could see that whole line. So there are only a few that are above 10, and again, you'll see a couple of 13s on here. This is still quite low for total phosphorus readings in the lake. That's where we want to be. These can fluctuate depending on time of year. Maybe something got stirred up where they were sampling right at that time. You know, I can't say exactly why one time we've got a reading of 13 or one time we've got a reading of 10. But the vast majority of our readings are 10 and below, which is really good. And part of that can be attributed to the alum treatment that we did. So that was to hold on to phosphorus, take it out of the water column. So we're lowering the total available phosphorus. So we're lowering food for algae. Overall, it's good for water quality. This has been a really good water quality year. Last year was as well. This year it was a bit interesting because we started out in a drought and then July was very rainy, but we didn't see any drastic changes when it came to water quality, which was good. I also included our tributary sampling phosphorus results. The highlighted cells on here are known sites. that our staff know of for having pretty predictably elevated phosphorus for total phosphorus and orthophosphorus. B1, R2, and Site 25 are all connected. So B1 is a pond on Blanchard Road right off of Route 4 in Auburn. That system comes under Route 4. There's a culvert, so that's R2. And where it actually goes into the lake is Site 25. So we know that system needs some work. I've been working with Time Bond on that. They did a study for us last year, and I'm talking to the homeowner about putting in the vegetative buffer, which is one of their recommendations around this pond that has high phosphorus. And then also doing some work on the stream system as it goes into the lake, because there's really heavily eroded soils there that we know are naturally high in phosphorus. And that sampling will continue through the fall. Our lake sampling typically ends when fall turnover occurs in the lake. On here we have the next page as clarity readings, so Secchi-disc readings. That's how many meters down we can see. As I said a bit earlier, this summer was actually very good for water quality. Despite all the rain we had, having a 12.5 clarity reading, that means you can see 12.5 meters down into the lake. That's a really good indicator of water quality as well. So this year has been great for that. Last year was too. We thought it might just be because of the drought conditions all last summer, but we had a very rainy middle of the summer and were able to maintain clarity, so that was great. I have in here June and July fecal testing results. Nothing really to describe about that, but it's in there for your reference. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we were talking about Sean Seary, who was our education and outreach coordinator. He left in May. We did post for the position, and we have an interview with an individual scheduled for Monday for that position. And then I just heard back from someone else today, another candidate who's interested, so we'll be scheduling that interview as well. We really want to fill that position. It's really important, and it's helpful for me to have somebody working with people like Will Libby on the trails, or working with Parks and Rec with the city. It's just, it's a critical role. And then also, we like to work with local schools too, you know, for programming, field trips, whatever it might be. Last year was really strange with that, with COVID, and this year it's still unpredictable, but we're definitely looking to fill that role.
It's a part-time job.
It is a part-time job, yep. Our courtesy boat inspections, that's something we do every year. We had Morgan Curtis doing that for us this year. She just wrapped up on Labor Day, so she did a great job and found a few plants for us. Luckily, they were all native. Nothing invasive was observed going in or out of the lake. So we'll continue that program again next year. We'll also continue the lake patrols next year. That's Auburn Police Department, who patrols the watershed for us during the summer months when there's a lot more traffic, a lot more foot traffic. They keep an eye on things for us. They check out the treatment plant. So they also wrapped up this past Labor Day weekend. And we'll work with them again next year too. Watershed projects, as I mentioned, I've been working with Time on the Blanchard Pond system that has a lot of phosphorus coming into the lake. Hopefully we can get in a vegetative buffer and work on some stream restoration to prevent such heavy erosion. I also am going to be working with Lewiston Public Works to do some work on Spring Road. There's some culverts that are failing that need to be replaced. There's some ditching that needs to be done. There's some regrading that needs to be done. So we're looking to start that probably next week. So that's let's see. Yeah, that is next week. The Outlet Beach. So myself and Chris Curtis, who's the water treatment plant manager, have been working with a city group. Dan was on that as well, to talk about reopening the Outlet Beach for swimming and revamping that recreation site. So the city had asked us to join this working group just to provide some insight on water quality, what options there are. So Auburn Water and Lewiston Water lab staff have been doing water quality sampling at the Outlet Beach area this summer. There was only one day that had really high it was fecal coliform. It was bacteria. The rest of the days that our staff went out sampling, it would have been passable by state standards for, they go by saltwater beaches, but we would apply those for these type of beaches too. So we've communicated that with city staff, and also I provided a couple of contacts for bird mitigation and possible aeration in the outlet beach to get that up and running again, to get more flow in there, get more oxygen in there, hopefully cut down on the waterfowl that are the primary problem for there being so much bacteria in there. So Chris and I will continue to work with that group, provide resources as we can, but I think it sounds like a really good opportunity, and I know Parks and Rec was looking at putting in a new playground and different activity areas for people of all age groups to be able to use that site. Also, I had a contact, somebody reached out to me about putting a granite bench, a memorial bench, at the Lakeshore Drive turnout where there's a picnic area, there's a couple trash cans there. So there was a resident of Auburn who frequented that spot. She loved it, and she passed away this past year. So her friends were looking to put in a memorial bench there. So I said I would bring that to the commission, and just where it is watershed land, ask for approval for that individual. They would be purchasing it, they would be placing it there, it would be in a low maintenance area, so we're not having to have people go out and, take care of it. So I was looking for approval from the commissioners for that individual to be able to place that memorial bench along Lakeshore Drive, right next to the lake.
Anybody have any?
I don't think I've ever stopped there. Is there picnic tables,
There's
tables there? Is there any benches now? Or?
Not granite. There are picnic tables, but,
benches?
right,
Yeah. I was going to say that probably look at how would we lay out a few if somebody else sees it and wants another one. Let's say make a plan for whatever, maybe 6 fit there, whatever's something that's
There's a lot of
reasonable.
land there.
yeah, it's fairly narrow, but it is. It extends for most of Lakeshore Drive, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be the recommendation, I guess, is if maybe we get a layout of what would it look like.
Okay.
What would be the maximum number we allow?
Yep.
Then let them pick a site. Because
Okay.
I think you're planning ahead for, people are gonna love that.
So max number layout.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so look at the bench, and it'd all be different, it doesn't really matter, I don't think, as long as it.
So if we look at that in-house just for a schematic, yeah, we can work on that, but once we have that set, is it okay to give this person permission to
Any objection?
have that place there?
I don't see any objection.
Last thing on my list here is farms. So we talked a little bit, myself and Dan and a couple other people when we were out of executive session. There is a horse farm that is being established on West Auburn Road. It's 616 West Auburn Road. There's actually a meeting right now, 5:30, public kind of community meeting with the city of Auburn at City Hall right now to talk about this. I think mostly it will be neighbors or people who live in that area who have questions and want to talk with the property owners about that.
What was the address?
It's 616 West.
616.
Yeah.
Just past his house on the
Yeah.
left, going out towards Turn.
Yep.
Where is it again?
About midway on the West Auburn Road.
Yeah.
Do you know where the trail came out from Perkins Ridge, the old one? There's a couple recreation signs.
The pack house?
Beyond that.
It's
Quite a bit
beyond
beyond that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of clearing going on.
You know, there's a little sign that says art classes.
Yeah.
Slow right
It's across
down
from that.
and look to your left. You'll see like a huge clearing, and you'll see rickers. You've never seen. It's been 200 years since someone's seen rickers from that property.
If you're noticing the clearing on
Yeah.
that side, yeah, that's the,
That's it.
that's it.
I'm gonna do it, you're
Put your 4-ways on if you have to, if it's commuting hour.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Or it will be an emergency.
So at that location on West Auburn Road, there are new owners of that parcel, and they are establishing a horse farm there. They hope to have a riding ring, lessons, and so they've been going through the city process of permitting, and I've been looped in on those emails, and I've looked at their phosphorus plan, I've looked at their farm plan. So just wanted to let you guys know that you probably have seen that going on, that they're in the permitting process, but they are going to have to go to planning board.
There's got to be close to the watershed boundary.
Yes, so
That must, most of it must be in the Taylor Pond boundary.
So their parcel is interesting, it's really long and rectangular. So the first part of it, I would say the first third of it, is in the Lake Auburn watershed, and the rest of it is in the Taylor Pond watershed. But all of their developed area that they're planning for this horse farm is in Lake Auburn watershed, it's closer to the road. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I've been talking with Eric about it, talking about different code people about it. There have been some abutters and some neighbors who aren't happy about it, but they're having a community meeting about it tonight, so I'm just going to stay as involved and informed as I can on it, and give you an update at the next meeting. I think that's all that I have, unless there's any other questions about what's going on in the watershed.
Just like to say that I, say that we're getting more educated back. It's such
Yes,
an important
me
position,
too.
and I know with my budget last year, I tried to make it a full-time position so we could share something. I will plow through that again this year. I think we'll get a better quality of a program if we can get a full-time position.
I completely agree. It's tough with it being part-time. We've had 2 good people in that role since I've been here, but it's hard to keep someone long-term unless they're, maybe the other option is you have younger people who are interested, or somebody who maybe is retired and they can do that part-time and they're not looking to make it full-time. That's another option. So we get a really varied applicant pool.
Can go with their strengths.
Exactly. So we'll see how it goes. But we do have that scheduled for next week.
Well, the budget, just a question of that too. Is there enough in the budget? I mean, obviously we've come up with higher rates to try to get people and
Yep.
more creative. So I'll say that for the budget recommendations.
I agree. Yeah.
Anything else? That it?
Yeah, that's it for me,
Marvelous,
unless there's
thank you.
questions.
If nobody's got any objections, you suppose we'd skip right down to 10 so that perhaps you wouldn't have to listen to us for the next few
Okay.
articles? Request from Perkins Ridge snow travelers to bypass middle and south gates on Brooklyn Spring Road.
So Brenda Benner is here. She's our officer, one of them.
One of them.
The
secretary.
president hasn't been able to make both meetings, but between the two of us, I can recuse myself from vote, and we can answer any questions. I know the permit was a rough draft. We don't have any objections to any of it. It seems like it'll work fine, and I'll just keep my fingers crossed that we get a good ice year, and we won't even need it.
Comments?
So this draft was drafted by who?
I can see the.
I drafted it.
Erica.
Did you draft this?
Yeah, you remember from the last meeting, we were authorized or directed to come up with some type of agreement, so this is what you have to do.
So this is the agreement that was developed by staff and the.
Yeah.
Right. Based on previous agreements that we utilized
Exactly.
and talked specifically of the concerns from the commission and also the intent of the Perkins Ridge troop. So try to reflect that.
Well, I think in my opinion, the only thing holding up the process last time is that there was a formal agreement. So I guess my comments on the matter are, I think if there was an amicable agreement, both sides are happy, I'd be more than comfortable moving forward.
Is that a motion?
What exactly are you looking for a motion for, I guess? To do what?
Execute the agreement.
All right, I make a motion to execute the agreement between Lake Auburn's Watershed Protection Commission and the
Perkins Ridge Snow Travelers.
Perkins Ridge Snow Travelers that was presented during today's meeting.
Want to second it?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Who was it? Alan? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Holbrook.
Sorry, all those in favor?
I just have a question.
Sure.
So number 4, the end talks about during winter months and at all times, so I just want to verify, I mean, when we mean all times, does that mean 3 o'clock in the morning? Like, are we allowing it at all hours? Is there any restriction to that? That's the only question I have. I don't know when you typically go, if you go out at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I just didn't know. If you had-
Probably not 3
Yeah,
o'clock in the
our-
morning,
our
but
grooming-
it is in the evening quite often.
Our grooming does occur because volunteers get home from work, so
Well, I figured it
sometimes
was kind of-
as late as 9 PM
Yeah.
or maybe 10 PM.
Right.
I just,
But we never through the morning hours or anything like that.
I didn't know if there was any impacts to anything that we would want to consider that, but otherwise I have no concern.
I remember the map from the last meeting, there really wasn't housing around us, I don't think. Residential.
No, there's not down on Spring Road.
No, where would be grooming?
It would actually be a form of policing, but I don't think we're going to be through there but 3 or 4 times a year. So, but you never know. You catch somebody or something going on.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Anyone opposed?
1 abstention.
Thank you.
601.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you. So next steps, this will be sent to the club for official signatures.
Get Larry to sign it.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Do you also want to move the budget considerations up?
That would be greatly appreciated.
Go for it.
So we put that on the agenda just kind of as a preliminary type heads up. We would like to get the budget posted a month before approval on our website, so that would be October 8th. We're looking to have a budget to post on the website. So I don't know if there are any, we haven't prepared any specifics to talk about, but we will be meeting and talking about funding for projects. Based on the budget.
So there are no considerations for us tonight?
No, not specifics. We haven't, yeah. I don't know if anyone has any wish list things or things they'd like to see enhanced or.
2 more porta potties would be good for these summer trail things. Set a good example of use the porta potty, not the trail.
Exactly.
That's the only thing I had. On that.
Well, if you think of anything, please email me. I'm sure I'm going to get together with Sid and Erica and Kevin, hammer something out. We'll send it out when we post it on the website. I think last year we sent it to all the commissioners as well as posted it. And then that gives you an opportunity to review it and have any specific questions, revisions, whatever, before we get to the actual meeting.
I really have 2 different little comments about the illegal. Obviously, we went over in our legal, was looking at, the ones on 1,000,
Again, it does fluctuate. Last year, we had enough legal and didn't spend a lot, so it truly deviates from year to year.
Moving past.
Yeah.
And then looking at the educational position, we'd like to add something
Definitely.
to that. 'Cause it's hard to keep up as it is.
Land negotiations, executive session regarding negotiations of potential land transactions. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Enter into executive session, we need to have motion to, making a motion to go into executive session.
I was going to shut the door. Everybody is.
Pursuant to the land negotiated executive session according to
So we have to have.
1 MRSA, section 456C.
Yes.
Thank you. Protocol.
Is there a vote? Everybody in favor?
There's donuts in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So there's the motion and the second, so.
I missed the second.
I seconded it.
Okay, thank you.
Shut the door.
All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone opposed? All right.
6:32, you're out of executive session.
On page 2.
Four more
Consideration for future workshops.
I want to make a recommendation that we do a workshop on clarifying protocol and just coming up with a, whatever, if it's a 2 or 3 page policy, of just what are the different things that we need to clarify on decision-making, on bringing up new topics, how do we get something on the agenda? You know, if it is relaxed Robert rules, what rules are we following under it, and which ones aren't we?
I'm all for that.
You know, like, something that just clarifies that, because again, you know.
This is what Commissioner Seer brought up in an email to add to the agenda item. So we didn't add it to the agenda item, but he outlines it here as well.
That's something I've actually been asking for, I think, and we meet so infrequently, I don't know if it's 5 or 6 months at this point. Because I think it's important, so for instance, even we didn't have a chair. We've been around for a long time. Most boards or commissions would have a very clear rule as to how to deal with something like that, so, right?
And I think we can workshop, if possibly even in October, where we know what all the questions we want to answer. Or come in with a smaller group, or do you think it should be the bigger group, or?
And we also all got a book a while back too, that has a lot of information and I think generates questions.
That's a lot in there.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, and we've had the presentation from Jim.
Right.
So a lot of that is in.
It's maybe writing it up, and I don't mind taking a stab at writing it up so that it's more readable. And more usable to refer to when you're in a meeting, you know, and I think.
I won't lie, I started doing some work, I sent something to Dan. I sort of scrapped it because it didn't really follow the format that the Auburn Water District bylaws follow, but I got so fed up one day that I actually put maybe about 3 hours into a draft, and I said, at some point, I'm gonna bring this to a committee at some point.
No, I think it's a workshop thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think there's also other items that we still have as draft that are in your handbook that need some discussion and resolution moving forward. The land use policy, right? There's a lot in there that we have as a draft. So there's plenty of topics. There's limited time from you. You say we all have jobs. You volunteer your time, we appreciate it. But if you want to do a workshop, I think it would be valuable.
Well, and I think you targeted on protocol, you know, meeting protocol, because even the agenda, you know, if we have visitors here, do we move that one up front? Or, you know, executive sessions, do we have them all together? You know, public comments to me should be up front, not at the end.
I know,
Things like that.
The whole meeting, you know, jeez.
And then there's, I heard, and I don't know Robert's rules of parliamentary procedure, so some people say you have to go by the agenda, and some people say you can, by vote, shift it, and so it'd be nice to know.
I just think meeting protocol.
Well, see, that's an interesting thing, right? Because under Robert's rules, we didn't adopt this agenda at the beginning of the meeting, so as a chair, you can do whatever you want, because it's not a duly adopted agenda, it's not.
Under Robert's rules, you can always suspend the rules.
Yeah, it's not set in stone.
There's ways of doing all that.
Right, so even if we did adopt it, yeah, we could just suspend it.
Well, would you like to have a workshop?
I just think to start the year fresh, I mean, I don't think there's gonna be much change here, maybe the counselor position, but we got a new person coming in. It's a good time to do it. And I don't know, maybe that can be teamed up with the November meeting where the budget's pretty short, there's not that much in the budget. But we already have a November meeting? Don't have the
We
meeting,
don't
just
have to, right? We don't have.
We meet in November, we don't meet in December.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a meeting, I think it's November
First.
first.
For the, oh.
November
A regular
10th,
meeting.
November 10th is our next scheduled meeting. That'll be budget, and then December 1st would be as necessary budget adoption.
Right.
So that's the one that we don't.
Yeah, we try to get the budget approved on November 10th.
So why not, right, because you want it done ahead of time, so why not use that meeting for
That's what I'm
this?
saying.
Right, a workshop, half of it's, this is the meeting, and the other half is a workshop.
Or do you mean the December 1st?
No, the December 1st.
Right, that's what I was saying. Not the same meeting as the budget, but the following meeting that's already on the thing for December.
And I guess one thing is how much time do people really would like to allot to this, these workshops, or to this meeting? This was, you know, we got back in person, a lot of things on here, a lot of things to discuss. We're, you know, 20 ways into this. what would you like to see? Because that depends on what kind of agenda you can build, or what kind of discussion you want. Are you looking to stick in a workshop to 2 hours?
You put a time
2 hours or
limit on it.
less.
Or less?
And there's a time limit, we'll start all over again then.
I'm just throwing it out there, right? So we have some expectations on what topics to
Oh, yeah,
discuss.
I was next.
That's what I said.
And I think it'd be worth a discussion to say that, you know, as we're going through, if we decide, you know, we're not done in the 2 hours, that we commit to saying that we're gonna create a subcommittee, and they're gonna do the work, and they're gonna report back by this meeting, and then we're just gonna review what's done. And then when you review what's already been done, it goes so much faster,
Yeah.
right? Because you're not creating a new process.
Everybody good with that, December 1st?
Can we have some food or a party? I mean, it is Christmas month. I mean, I'm just.
Yes,
Workshop
Kate-
December
Caleb
1st.
waiting outside?
November
Can we have
10th is
meet
the
for the
regular meeting.
workshop?
Trying to just meet.
I just like to make that recommendation.
Nothing in October?
They haven't, no one's added anything in October?
No. Nope. We got November for.
Oh. We've only been out for 5 minutes.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's only been 5 minutes.
Everybody's good with that?
Yeah, I think so, and making the December meeting a workshop too.
December 1st workshop meeting.
Open session. Open session for commissioners.
Oh, that was for the public guide.
Yeah.
You're welcome to.
Yeah, for the public comment.
Public comment,
one.
please do.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, thank everyone for, letting me be here for the time I was today, and for, the majority of this year. It's been a great time serving, and, just due to the events of last night, I do have to take a step back, so I'm not breaking the rules of this committee, and I just wanna, hopefully I'll be back here at some point in another official capacity, but it's been great, and thank you all for all the work that you do, and look forward to working with you more in the future.
I'll jump in and defend Councilor Roebuck. He is a citizen of Lewiston as well as a councilor, and I don't see why he can't serve as the citizen
The
representative.
rule just says one city councilor.
Only be
It's in
one.
the bylaws.
That's why I don't wanna break that rule. I appreciate that, but thank you.
Well, you have one councilor sitting, and then you have a citizen sitting. And you would be representing as a citizen, or I may have a solution for you. You may be the council representative.
Well, and that's where I don't think you need to completely bow out, but the
Yeah.
next meeting, you'll be here as a citizen if you wanted to be here, but.
I guess
the
if we
elections
could
land
get
and
like
then
a
see what they appropriated.
clarification on that, because I know like the rules do specifically say one city councilor, and you could I think, I would interpret that being as the citizen cannot be there in that same role.
Yeah.
But if there is a clarification on that, would that be possible to get?
But I'm thinking that they could be on that too, but even just sitting out the November meeting, we're gonna have the elections, see where they land, see if you're appointed as a city councilor, or if you didn't make it, you come back as a
I
citizen.
guess-
You know what I mean, like, it's just really one meeting.
I guess that works.
You know?
Yeah, don't need
It's
to
like
leave.
one meeting.
I
Step
think,
back,
I think Jim should be consulted, only because things like this have similarly happened. We have, not the same restrictions, but some restrictions with regard to committees. For instance, in Auburn, the planning board, you cannot be on any other city council appointed committee. You cannot be appointed by the city council to anything else. In cases like that, when someone has been appointed to the planning board, they have immediately forfeited their other seats.
Yeah.
Or in cases where the city council wasn't paying attention, and in the past has appointed someone to something else, they have immediately forfeited their position on the planning board. I'm not saying that's the case here, but I think my experience would lead me to say, like, I would really want council to weigh in on that one.
And right now, Caleb, your term is set to expire January 9th of 2024. So,
So you can check with the.
Yeah,
with
I
Kevin.
agree with Evan
What's the
there.
paper trail, make sure you can see it.
Make sure it's,
Yeah, I
if Jim's
completely.
like, hey, yeah, it's good, then it's good.
Yeah, and if not, then, yeah, I'll take the appropriate steps after that.
Right, there's no point in bowing out unless you have to.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, yeah, that's good. I would really, if possible, to get guidance from council on that to make sure that everything's following the rules the way they should be. So, I agree with that and appreciate that.
I have to say, for so many years, the chairs were held by the same people. And in the last couple of years, there's been a great turnover, and we don't have that problem.
I would love to stay on if possible, but my primary concern is making sure I am following the
Absolutely.
rules.
Yeah.
Education and outreach coordinator.
You looking at it?
I have a full-time job.
Well, it's a part-time job. We could make it work.
Oh, I've thought about it. I do have a background in that.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Before you do that,
Yes, sir.
I had something in open comment. It's incredibly late. I don't want to particularly spend a lot of time on it. It's with regard to an email that I sent to all the commissioners. We know that the Lake Auburn study should have come out, that the city commission should have come out, which means that it probably won't come out, for another year or something like that, right? This is a joke there. I've been told that it is to come out like imminently, there has been communications with at least one of our clerks and state agencies. That communication happened verbally, so there's not really a record, but the implications of that might be really important to some of the decisions we make. The lake study might come out and say, these types of limited activities can be supported by the lake. But that sort of is a moot point if the state agencies that are overseeing our filtration waiver are of the opinion that any of those would result in a loss of the filtration waiver. Sid was really honest and gracious about the discussion he had with a couple of folks at the state. But he did ask that if we wanted him to reach back out to those individuals and get that information in writing, that he be formally asked by the commission, so that it didn't look as though he was sort of acting unilaterally on his own to get the information. So I bring it up. I know it's a long meeting. It's been a long meeting, but I bring it up only because I know that study is going to be coming out, and I think that that's the kind of information that is going to be important for us to know when that drops. So is that something that we want to ask Sid to go get or not? Yeah.
Well, I actually have we have 2 waivers from filtration. There's 2 drinking water systems involved, so there's 2 licenses, 2 waivers. I actually reached out to the drinking water program separate of Sid and have that response as well. So if that would be adequate, I could forward that.
Did you get it in writing?
Email.
Okay, so.
It was a quick response time based on what we're looking at, so. If that suffices.
I guess it, I
Or if
guess
you want
it,
specifically for Sid to ask.
no, it doesn't have to be Sid. I guess I want it to be specific to the question. I want it to be specific to the question that was raised, which was
body contact. If any of it would be allowed, if that would pose a risk and loss of the filtration.
Yeah, so that's the
what
specific
you-
question that was asked. So as long as you got an answer from the state agencies responsible for.
Well, this one was more related to the Sun Journal article and spoke more of the Auburn Water District. So that's why I say that. I've done my due diligence as the licensed operator for Lewiston, but it doesn't speak specifically to what you would pose or what this initial question was specifically for the Auburn Water waiver. They're one and the same if it's certain trips.
Okay, so.
Okay.
Okay.
So if Auburn Water said, I want to filter our water, they can do that. You can electively do that.
Right.
But if there's actually one of the founding principles on how we got the waiver, if that's violated, then we would both be tripped into that.
Right.
The mechanism is different.
It doesn't matter to me if it was you or Sid or both of you together in conjunction or any staff member. I hung it on Sid only because he had been the one that made the comment in the paper, and he had expressed that he had had that discussion. So since he was the one that had the discussion with the state, that's why I was talking about Sid contacting them. As long as we have an answer to that question in writing from individuals at the state, I am satisfied. I guess I assume you have my email and you know what question you asked. So my question to you would be, does the question that you posed and the answer that you got specifically answer the question whether or not allowing bodily contact will result in an automatic loss of the waiver? Because that was the question, right?
I will check my question on the response, and if it does, I'll forward it to the commission.
Yeah, I'd say forward it, and then you can decide if that's satisfactory based on what you provide.
Yeah, no, because I just think that is important for us to know. If the state says any bodily contact, additional bodily contact results in an immediate loss of the waiver, which was sort of what was indicated, well, it's really important for us to have that. But I really want to have it in writing because it's the kind of thing that I want to be able to hang my hat on in making decisions and saying like, look, I didn't make this decision in a vacuum. We didn't do this because we felt it was the right thing. We did this because we had information from the state.
OSHA says if it's not written, it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and I think too, within the emails that I have seen, Kevin, it's a little convoluted. It's in between an article conversation, it's just a straight asked question,
Yes.
a straight asked answer, whether that's in a memo or,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
a response, is that, I think it needs to be a little cleaner from what I've seen.
Yeah.
You know, just say, hey, on behalf of both of our waivers, we're asking this question again in a separate email, not mentioning the article in the newspaper, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
just coming back to
Yeah.
clean. So I've seen the emails, it's
Yeah.
a little bit of a change,
The-
and I don't think that's something we wanna pass on.
No, we don't want to pass that on. It was that I had sent that to the commission so the commission would understand why I was even bringing it up. Because it's sort of like, it doesn't make sense if you don't understand why I'm asking, right? So yeah, no, that would not be, it would be like a very specific question, yeah. So, but anyway, I'm willing to wait to see what we have, and that's fine with it. But, so that was that.
Thank you.
One more commissioner open session, or is there more?
Carry on.
Carry on. Okay, so just a little bit of handout. The Protection of Lake Auburn Subcommittee for Auburn Water District was reactivated last meeting. So we just had an organizational meeting today, and we would like the commission to designate one or two commissioners to be a part of reviewing the bylaws for the Protection of Lake Auburn. We're not amending them, but if we do amend them, Jim Cross wrote an 8-page letter, which is included in this packet, how we should do that, and you guys are obviously stakeholders. So there's 2 of them for the clerks, and if commissioners want to let them know, October 13th, next month, at 2 p.m. at City Hall, we don't know what room yet, will be the meeting for the Protection of Lake Auburn Subcommittee to review the bylaws for the Protection of Lake Auburn.
So it's got a confusing title to me being new to all of this, this is a separate group.
So this is the
Not
Auburn Water
subcommitted to us.
District's bylaws, which
Yeah.
basically govern the protection of Lake Auburn. And then based on that, the commission can make rules and regulations based on those. So it kind of all ties in, and Jim Cross really went through all that. So I got 2 packets here, and I can give one to Sid and to Kevin, and then they can give it to whichever commissioner. Just send a note. Even staff is welcomed. What the 3 pages is was today's agenda, the notes on amending the bylaws or reviewing the bylaws to date, and then the memorandum from Jim Cross that we just received last meeting, I think it was, to actually formally amend the bylaws when and if we get to that. And this one is yours.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that's it on that.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. You like the board?
Right.